Evening, everybody. I will call to order the Town of Los Gatos Planning Commission meeting, April 23rd, 2025. As we begin the meeting tonight, I would request that staff present the town's rules of decorum and civility, but this may be an old note that I don't need to continue to carry on this script.
That's correct.
Awesome. All right, then I will now call the roll. Commissioner Burnett.
Here.
Commissioner Raspy. Here. Commissioner Barnett.
Here.
Commissioner Stump.
Here.
I'm Vice Chair Birch. I am here, and please note that Chair Emily Thomas is absent this evening. Please join us with Commissioner Stump leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
If you're able to stand, please do so and join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. As the Planning Commission conducts the meeting this evening, we encourage active participation of the public, which is essential to the democracy and the important work of the Planning Commission. Public input is very much welcome and is always considered. You can participate in a couple of different ways. You can always provide written comments about any agenda item and submit those to staff. Or if you'd like to speak during the meeting, you can fill out one of the speaker cards, which will give you an opportunity to either speak at the beginning of the meeting on any items not on today's agenda, or you can identify an item on the agenda and address it during that time. If you wish to address the commission tonight during the verbal communications portion or a public hearings agenda item, thank you, Steve. Please raise your hand on Zoom if that is appropriate. Or again, if you are here in person, you can fill out a card and please hand to staff and they will make sure that we get those. When you are called to speak, please come up to the podium and we ask that you speak directly into the microphone as this meeting is being recorded. State your name, address, and indicate that you are speaking, or indicate that you are speaking anonymously if you prefer. You will have 3 minutes to speak. We will now begin the verbal communications portion of the meeting, during which members of the public are invited to address the commission on any issue that is not on the agenda. You will have 3 minutes, and currently I only have one card. Mr. Eli Robles. Mr. Robles, you'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Planning Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Eli Robles. I'm a field representative for Carpenters Union Local 405 that covers the city of Los Gatos. I'm here to address the need for labor standards in upcoming projects planned in Los Gatos. Whether the project is public or private, labor standards should never be overlooked. A fundamental standard is healthcare for construction workers. Construction is one of the most dangerous occupations in the U.S., and I find it deeply concerning that healthcare is often not guaranteed for those putting their safety on the line every day. Workers deserve to know that their health and well-being are prioritized. Another essential labor standard that should be considered is requirements to hire workers from an accredited apprenticeship program. These programs help cultivate the next generation of skilled workers, ensuring that the workforce remains strong, knowledgeable, and prepared for the challenges ahead. It's not just about building projects, but building a future for workers. Los Gatos has the opportunity to get this right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker? No? Thank you. All right, we'll move on to our consent calendar. Tonight we have 3 items on our consent calendar, including approval of the meeting minutes from April 9th, 2025. Before the Planning Commission acts on the consent calendar, any members of the commission or public may request that an item be pulled from the consent calendar. Are there any such requests?
Yes, Chair. You should have 2 speaker cards in the list for item number 3 to be pulled.
All right, so we will pull that And obviously, then the consent calendar now has 2 items. Since it's been a minute since I've chaired, I assume I move forward on the consent calendar before we go. Okay, wonderful. Do we have any comments or a motion for the items on the consent calendar?
Chair, I'll move to approve the consent calendar with the exception of item number 310, Charles.
Do we have a second? Great,
Second the motion.
wonderful. All right, I will call the question. All in favor? It's unanimously. You're throwing off my script since I didn't know we were going to pull something. All right. So we will now move on to the public hearings. And now our first item is going to be item number 3, previously from the consent calendar. Consider an appeal of a community development director decision to deny a fence exception request for an existing fence partially located in the town's right-of-way and exceeding the height limitations within the required front yard and street side yard setbacks on property zoned R-1D, located at 10 Charles Street, APN 532-36022. Project is categorically exempt pursuant to CEQA guidelines, section 15303, new construction or conversion of small structures, fence height exception application FHE-23-001. The property owner applicant is, I hope I say your name right, I hope, Farouz Pradhan. And the project planner is Sean Mullen, who I understand is not available this evening, who will be giving the staff report.
Thank you. So there's no staff report. This item is being requested to be continued so that the applicant can address the direction from the previous Planning Commission meeting. Additionally, as in the desk item, they're not available this evening.
So we are only pulling this to allow for public testimony?
You have 2 speakers, and I don't know if the town attorney has any additional comments on the speaking now or at the future meeting.
One option would be for the chairperson to ask the speakers if they're able to come to the next meeting. Has it been scheduled for a future meeting yet?
I think they are potentially available for the next
Okay.
meeting, but they wish to speak this evening.
Okay. If they're available, my recommendation is that they be asked to come to the meeting at which this will be discussed so that everybody can have the benefit of their comments.
Okay. This is a little new to me, so in that case, we do have 2 speaker cards. I believe it's Kevin Cherney and Kent Anderson. Is that acceptable, that we hold your testimony until? All right. So
There's no requirement to open the public hearing,
okay.
so. If it is your position that you're not available for the meeting at which this will be discussed, you're welcome to give testimony tonight.
Okay. I agree. Oh, sir, just a moment.
Yeah.
I'm fine. Let's go ahead and
Okay.
and allow that. So, all right, we're gonna open the public testimony for item number 3, and I have a speaker card. The first one I have is, I believe it's Kevin Chesney, sorry.
So, hello, as you remember, I'm Kevin Chesney, the owner of 2 Charles Street that has owned the property since 1990. Bought the property and also bought it with respect to the fencing that was there, including 302 Charles Street. You know, I expressed my concerns last time, and I'm sorry if I wasn't as articulate as I could have been. And for that, I apologize. I also, as my neighbor Kent Anderson, who will speak after me, was unaware of the violation that the city raised with respect to the fence until the appeal. We kept trying to work collegially with our neighbor to address my concerns. If you look at what we just both presented, I have text messages back to 2022 raising my concerns, telling him that I thought it was unsafe. But he built his fence. Both Kent and I objected, as well as our neighbor Matthew Daly, who I actually is traveling to Thailand, would be here today, but he had an accident. And yet Feroz said nobody was concerned about the fence that he created for construction, but we were all being neighborly. We were all being kind. We were all trying to support him. But, it is a clear example in my mind of building something that a educated contractor knew wasn't compliant and then asking everybody for his forgiveness, which is quite annoying given he's an educated contractor. He knows the law. He knows what is required of him. He knew it when he bought the property. With respect to Feroz's letter to Mr. Mullen to justify the exception, I would comment on several of his points. First, he states that Charles Street is a quiet, dead-end street with only a handful of residents. I wish his assessment of the situation were true, but it's not that quiet, in fact, and there's actually a U-turn, a no U-turn on that street based upon the fact that most parents try to use that as a way to circumvent their ability to get to Van Meter or Fisher. That is one of the most, heavily transcribed areas of kids walking back and forth. You have no idea. You need to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning or 7:30. It's dangerous. Second, he states that the stop sign ensures our safety, but we cannot see properly when we proceed to within the crosswalk. We have to get out into the crosswalk to actually see. I can see fine to the right because my neighbor at 302 Charles Street, which is Kent, has a 45-degree angle.
I'm afraid that's your time.
Okay, so fine.
Are there any questions, though?
Chair, one question, Mr. Chesney. First of all, thank you for appearing in the first instance and again this evening. Our directive or our hope last time was that the neighbors would come together, talk about the issue, see if there was resolution. My only question to you is, has there been a discussion between you and the applicant since our last meeting?
One discussion to meet next week, and this has been going on. As Sean Mullen says, we keep kicking the can down the road.
Okay, no, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And it's frustrating.
I appreciate it. Thank
Terribly frustrating.
Any other questions? I do have one. You were just mentioning that the visibility, that you can't see till you're in the crosswalk. Are you trying to say, like, I need to be halfway through the street, or like at the corner? Can you just...
I'll be more specific. I
would
have
like
to
that,
be
please.
out into the crosswalk, which means I have to go into an area that is dangerous for the students who are walking with their parents.
Okay.
Secondly, I just talked to Michelle Handley, who spoke, which is the neighbor on the other side, and she said to me just a few minutes ago that she gets out of her car and looks over so she can tell whether or not there's any issues. It's appalling.
Okay, thank you so much.
It's absolutely appalling.
If I can ask you one question, have you observed any accidents involving other cars or pedestrians?
Per my last situation, Matthew Daly actually had an accident himself, 5 Charles Street, based upon the prior fence. Kent will speak, and he will say that he witnesses accidents at that intersection probably monthly. It is a very, very difficult intersection.
Thank you for that. Appreciate your comment.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry I didn't get through it all.
All right, Kent Anderson? You'll have 3 minutes, Mr. Anderson.
Okay, thank you. My name is Kent Anderson. I live right across the street from Farouche, actually, and I work right in that office for the most part. I've kind of moved recently, but I worked in that office. I would witness an accident there almost once a month, to be honest with you. That's one of the busiest places in Los Gatos. It's right on Los Gatos Boulevard and Highway 9. You know, everybody who comes downtown, or half the people who come downtown, exit onto 17 right there. And that's the one area where it goes from one lane into 2 lanes because there's a turn lane there. People are going through there fast because they want to make the light. They want to get on to the freeway. And then also we have, we got Van Meter, we got Fisher going down there every single day. We also have Mariposa, I guess they're speaking here as well. They're just around the corner. So we got kids that go by there from 8 o'clock to 8:30, and probably hundreds of them, and it's really not fair. You can't stop right at the stop sign there. You have to go past the line where the stop sign says stop in order to see around the corner, which is into the crosswalk. It's almost too late. This is a serious hazard. And in addition to that, his lattice work doesn't meet the code. It's supposed to be 20%. It can only be 20% obscured. His is probably double that. So it should, in addition to that, he's planted a bunch of bushes alongside. It's made it an impossible situation, and I really think this needs to be denied. It needs to be cut down to 3 feet. All the bushes there need to be cut down to 3 feet. There's absolutely no reason for this. This house isn't really on Charles. They just changed the address with this last owner. It's really 268 Los Gatos Boulevard, and that's the way it's been forever. So I really hope you guys would just deny it flat out. And then we do have a meeting set up with him, but it's the same nonsense I've heard all along. He wants to take out a couple of pieces of lattice or something that's not really going to make much difference. That's really all I had to say. Thank you guys for listening.
you.
Appreciate it.
Any questions? No?
Can I ask one question of staff? I'm looking back at the meeting minutes from March 12th. And basically, at that time, the motion was that the appellant confer with staff with respect to addressing the right-of-way issue and the safety issue, and that it be brought back to the Planning Commission if staff is not prepared to decide on its own. So do we know what that status is as far as the action?
We do not.
So to be continued, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you.
All right, I will close the public portion of this item. Look to my commissioners for any comments, questions of staff, or a motion.
I'll go ahead, Chair. I'll begin. I was prepared to have this on the consent calendar, and I'm actually glad it came off. I'm glad to see that the neighbors are working towards it and are alerting us to the potential issues here. I'm loath to render a judgment on it tonight because the applicant isn't available, but I'm also hesitant to continue this much longer given that there are some apparent safety issues. So I would move to continue this to the first available date, and a date certain so that we can resolve this as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Anyone else? Comments? Mr. Barnett?
Was that a motion? If so, I'll second.
I'll just ask staff, do we have a date available that we can set it tonight?
We probably have a date available, but we don't know if the applicant's available.
Can I ask that we set it for that date, and we'll just set it for that date and let the applicant object if it's unavailable, if they're unable to do it.
Sure, so that would be May 14th rather
14th.
than May 28th.
Second?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So we have a motion. Any other comment? All right. Then all in favor? Passes unanimously to date certain of May 14th. I assume there are no appeal rights or anything on this for us to bring up?
No.
Thank you.
1 second. Why can't we do the 14th?
The 14th is no longer available due to legal ad requirements. We would have to do May 28th to abide by the legal ad requirement.
This doesn't require legal ad because we're continuing it to a date certain.
Okay.
All right. And we will now move on to item number 4. Consider request for approval to modify an existing conditional use permit for an increase in the hours of operation of a nursery school, Mariposa Montessori School, on property zoned R18, located at 16548 Ferris Avenue, APN 532-07127, conditional use permit U-20 2025-002. It's categorically exempt pursuant to the CEQA guidelines, section 15301, existing facilities. The applicant is Rika Mundku, I am going to hope I said your name right, with the Mariposa Montessori School, property owner Faith Lutheran Church, and the project planner is Maria Chavarin. Before the staff report, has everybody had a chance to look at the property? Are there any questions for staff? No? All right. Can we get our staff report?
Yes. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Maria Chavarin, Project Planner for the property at 16548 Ferris Avenue. Thank you so much for the introduction of the application. So yes, the item before you this evening is a modification to a previously approved conditional use permit to extend the hours of operation for the Mariposa Montessori School from 8:15 a.m. to 4:15 p.m. to 8:15 a.m. to 6 p.m. No additional modifications are proposed to the conditional use permit application. For the record, condition number 21 of the previously approved conditional use permit has been omitted with this staff report. As required, as a required annual review reporting has been met at the Planning Commission hearing of June 10th, 2020. And this will conclude staff's presentation, and staff is available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No? We will now open the public portion of the hearing. I do not have a speaker card on this item. Was there anyone from the school that was going to speak this evening? Yeah, why don't you go ahead and come on up?
Hi, Minal Singh.
Slow
I'm president of the board of directors for the Montessori, and we have our executive director here, Reka.
Great.
And essentially, we're just extending our aftercare hours to meet need of parents who have requested this. And given the current situation with more parents working and the losing families because they're not providing enough childcare, therefore we're requesting for this extension of time.
Okay. Are there any questions? Mr. Raspy?
Quick question. First of all, thank you again for appearing this evening. Quick question. First of all, I didn't note it in the report. Any feedback from the neighbors?
Yeah, we submit letters to all of the neighbors, and nobody has sent a complaint. In fact, I happen to be one of the neighbors.
Very convenient. A second question is, and just clarification, I think staff indicated the extended operating hours to 6 p.m., but I thought our staff report said 6:15. Can you clarify which is it you're seeking?
We requested 6 p.m.
6 p.m. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Sorry, Mr. Barnett, and then Ms. Burnett.
Thanks. I think your submission to the Planning Commission said that you have an expectation of 15 parents only who might come late.
Yeah, so currently there's only 12 families that are currently using aftercare. So we expect, 12 to 15 families using this service, additional
Okay,
service.
thank you.
Ms. Burnett.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to go ahead and make a motion, if I may. Okay,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion.
I think I actually,
Maybe,
hold
is
on.
there any public comment?
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate, hold on. I think, thank you. We don't have any further
You're welcome.
questions for you. I do not have any other speaker cards.
And there are
Is
no
there anyone on
hands.
Zoom?
There are no hands on Zoom.
All right. Typically, you have time to come and speak again, but you do not have to. It's your choice if you would like to come and add anything. Okay. All right. Then I will close the public portion of this item, and then I will ask the commissioners if there are any questions of staff, comment, or a motion. Commissioner Burnett.
Okay, I'll go ahead and make a motion for approval to modify an existing conditional use permit for an increase in the hours of operation in a nursery school, Mariposa Montessori School, on property zoned R-18, APN 532-07-127, categorically exempt pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, which is CEQA, guidelines, Section 15301, existing facilities. Property owner Faith Lutheran Church, applicant Rika Mudkar, Mariposa Montessori School. I can make the findings required for CEQA. I can also make the required findings for a conditional use permit, as well as the conditions of approval. That would be my motion.
Excellent, thank you. Do we have a second? Commissioner Stump. All right. Are there any comments or questions? No? Then I will call the question. All in favor? Passes unanimously. Are there any appeal rights?
There are appeal rights. Thank you, Chair. Anyone who's not satisfied with the decision of the Planning Commission can appeal the decision to the Town Council. Forms are available in the clerk's office and online. There is a fee for filing the appeal, and the appeal must be filed within 10 days.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. All right, we will now move on to item number 5. Consider a request for approval to demolish an existing accessory structure and construct a new accessory structure exceeding 1,000 square feet in gross floor area and site improvements requiring a grading permit on property zoned HR-2.5, located at 16511 Cypress Way, APN 532-24-004. Architectural and Site Application S-24-045. This is project is exempt pursuant to the CEQA Section 15303A, new construction or conversion of small structures. The property owners are Jackie and Scott Colander, applicant Michael Harris, and the project planner is Surrey Nathan. Before we get the staff report, has everybody had a chance to visit the site? Or are there any items to note? Commissioner Barnett.
Yeah, for the first time in 5 years on the Planning Commission, I was not able to find the property, but I did do my best to evaluate it based on internet resources, including Google Earth and Google Maps. Thank you.
Mr. Stump, same comment? All right. Okay, perfect.
And I have to make the same comment as Commissioner Barnett. I went up and down, and I think it was one house. I thought it was the other house. And so I'm not quite sure, but I did review all the documents.
All right, excellent. All right, Mr. Nathan, you'll be presenting our staff report for us.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. Before you is an architectural and site application, and project is located at 16511 Cypress Way, and it is in the HR 2.5 zone. The applicant proposes demolishing the existing structure and constructing a new approximately 1,200 square foot detached accessory structure consisting of 3-car garage with the workshop. The proposed project meets the technical requirement for the town code for floor area, height, setback, and on-site parking. The Planning Commission is considering the project due to the proposed accessory structure exceeding 1,000 square feet in gross floor area as required by the Hillside Development Standards and Guideline. The applicant also requires exception to the Hillside Development Standard for light reflective value and the depth of cut exceeding the maximum allowed for accessory building. And the Hillside Development Standard Guideline requires that the exterior material of structures not exceed an LRV of 30, and the applicant proposes an LRV of 69 so as to match the color of the existing house. And it also limits grading cut depth outside the footprint of the primary residence to 4 feet. The applicant proposes a maximum cut depth of 13 feet 6 inches for the accessory building, 11 feet for the hardscape, and 7 feet for the landscape. And the applicant has provided the justification in Exhibit 5. And this concludes staff's presentation, and staff will be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Nathan. Are there any questions of staff at this time? No? All right. Okay. Then we will now open the public portion of this item. I have one speaker card, Mr. Harris. Mr. Harris, you'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Michael Harris, the architect for the Colanders for this project. Essentially, we're replacing the 2-car garage with a 3-car garage in the same place. going to talk about the challenges and the exemptions that we are requesting. A lot of the materials, colors, and reflectance is designed to match the existing house and the garage being demoed. The garage cannot be seen from the street, and from the back side, you essentially have the bulk of the roof, which meets the LRB requirements. 30. The other item for the grading, the southeast corner of the garage is fairly steep, and in order to maintain the same garage level without having to redo the driveway or the approach to it, we're maintaining that same garage level. So at that corner, there is some extra grading that we have to on that item. The other thing is it is very hard to find. I too had a challenge when I first went up there as well. Being that it's in a very high fire severity zone, we've already gone through the alternate means and methods with the county fire department and received approval. And so some of those elements of including an extra address visibility sign at the fork, so when you're approaching the split for Cypress Way, it'll actually become a little more visible so that you can go up the road, and it's mainly for the fire department. We're also adding a 5,000-gallon water tank, adding fire sprinklers, a wharf fire hydrant on site, a 2-hour fire-rated wall between the breezeway and the house, and again, incorporating all the wildland urban interface guidelines for non-combustibility, vegetation management, closed eaves, those guidelines that are required in a very severe severity zone. And so pretty much, again, it's just replacing an old structure from the 1960s. There's signs of aging going on with the efflorescence for the CMU, and then just aging materials. So it's time to replace that garage.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker?
I realize the site has its challenges with the hillside there. Are there any other siting options that would allow for compliance with the maximum graded cut of 4 feet for all elements of what you're trying to do?
For the grading elements for that particular size, no. We can't move it closer to the house because it will block access to the various doorways. And so essentially we would have to move eastward, which is where the hillside starts to slope up.
Thank you.
Burnett?
Thank you for your presentation. The proposed conditions of approval require that before a grading permit issue that you have a geotech report and that it be peer reviewed by a town chosen geotech. My question is, have you done any preliminary work with a geotechnical engineer regarding the grading issues?
Yeah, we've already obtained a soils report.
You can actually move that up.
Sure.
There you go.
We've already obtained a soils report and is ready to address the grading with the civil engineer, as well as the foundation issues that will come up during building plan check with the structural engineer.
One of the concerns under the town code is drainage that's associated with grading over the limit that's provided in the code. So the question is, are there any drainage issues that you anticipate in light of the grading in that location?
No, the civil engineer actually diverted some and created drainage in response to the some of the questions during plan check or planning. from the town's engineer. And so those will also be further addressed in the grading permit.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Barnett?
Yes, and thank you for coming this evening. So question, 8 protected trees will be removed, and I know you're going to be replacing some. Will the house and garage be more visible with the removal of the trees?
No, and actually we're not replacing any of the trees, and that's in response to the very high fire severity zone. If we start replacing the trees, we would have a continuous canopy which would accommodate no break if there is a wildfire. So that's the reason. That's more on the back side of the garage, and pretty much you see a small sliver mainly of the roof, and you would still have low visibility because there are trees along the fence side and foliage along the barrier on the neighbor's side that adds to the screening.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No? All right, thank you. I do not have any other speaker cards. Is there anyone on Zoom?
Thank you, Chair. I do not see any hands raised on Zoom.
All right. You can obviously come back and make a closing statement if you would like. I don't think there's any other questions for you, so it's up to you. All right. Then I will close the public portion of this item. Commissioners, are there any questions of staff, discussion, motion? Okay, Mr. Barnett.
Question for staff. Is it correct that the grading limit is 50 cubic yards and the proposal is for 415 cubic yards?
That is correct.
Thank you.
I have a question, just maybe a bit before my own knowledge. In a fire zone like this, if they're removing trees, and then in those situations, they are not required to replace, is that correct? Or is it an exception that we typically grant in those areas?
There is an in lieu fee, and the applicant's proposing to pay in lieu fee instead of planting the recommended trees.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Barnett?
Yes, question for staff. So the light reflective value, the LRV, which in our hillside design guidelines is 69, whereas they're no, it's 30, and they're requesting to change the color with a value of 69, which is much higher. And I guess they want to match the color of the house. So the question becomes, the house color must be now out of not the correct value as well. And so that is a problem. And my question regarding the trees, and there's no replacement. And the viewing of a home on the hillside is quite an issue for our town. And that's why we have this materials and color guideline. So my question is, a value of 69 is quite high, actually, but now we're saying that the house is the same color, so how does that impact, since now we're actually looking at the house color being not along with our guidelines? Could you help me on that one?
Well, yes, I mean, as you said, the existing house is not complying with the LRV of 30. And as for the trees that are being removed are in the back of the house on the hillside portion. And it probably wouldn't impact from view from street below, but it might impact the house above that. I'm not sure regarding that.
Yeah, I'm through the chair. So, there's a number of homes in the hillside that were built and painted prior to our light reflective value going into place. So we do have a number of homes that don't meet that. The applicant here is requesting to be allowed to exceed it for the detached accessory structure to match the house. We don't have any leverage from our end to compel them necessarily to repaint their house. Obviously, that's not necessarily an inexpensive endeavor. But we generally deal with these situations when someone comes in for an addition or a new house, and then that's how we try to rectify that issue in the future.
Okay, thank you for that.
Any other questions of staff or discussion? Yes.
Mr. Paulson, one more question on this, just out of curiosity. What is the range on the LRV from what number to what number, if you know?
I'm going to guess 0 to 100.
Okay.
0 probably being black, 100 probably being white.
Okay.
That's a total guess.
Just curious. Thanks so much.
All right, is there any discussion then around, why don't we just go ahead and start talking about the size, right? One of the reasons that we are seeing this item in front of us is because it does exceed the 1,000 square foot gross floor area. So I would invite that discussion among my commissioners. Is this a concern item before we move into the grading?
Chair, I'll go ahead and.
Please.
And actually, if you don't mind, I'll just dump all my issues out, and then you can tackle those as you want.
Issue dump away.
And actually, I'm not going to say I have any issues necessarily. The LRV, yes, it's concerning, but to me, again, the house isn't extraordinarily visible. In fact, none of us could find it. And the fact that they're trying to match an existing home, to me, argues that it probably isn't as big a concern as it otherwise could be. Also, we have notes from the consulting architect who had no comment to the structure, which I would probably put into the category, the color of the structure, into that discussion as well. So the LRV doesn't bother me as much. The grading, the architect has indicated that there are no workarounds for that. It is essentially, it is what it is if they're going to do this work. The fire issue, I think we can all agree that what the new structure will be much more fire resistant, repellent than what currently exists. And so I think if one of our goals here is to make a more fire-safe hillside, this project goes towards that end, including the use of the materials, the sprinklers, the tank. So for all those reasons, I would support the project in its current iteration.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Espy. Any other comments? Okay, Commissioner Stump?
I think I have a slightly different take primarily on this cut. I certainly understand the desire to have, what is a 1,283 square foot garage, which includes 3 cars and a workshop area. But part of the problem is being driven by the size of this garage, and that is a significant cut. And this is a hillside standard, not a guideline. And so I kind of hold a little more fast to the whole concept that I certainly understand what the owner wants to do, what the applicant wants to do, but in this case, I'm going to find it very hard to just let that standard go by the board as it relates to the cut.
Thank you, Commissioner Stump. Barnett?
I share the concern about the grading request in that its magnitudes of size in violation of our code standard, and I assume the underlying purposes for the grading standard are potentially aesthetic, but thinking more in this case, possible hillside stability and drainage issues. And to me, adding one garage bay does not warrant that amount of excess of our standard.
Thank you. I guess I will make some comments then. As far as the LRV matching existing, I think this is, to me, that's really not a conversation stopper. It matches the existing home. I do have concerns, though, about the excessive grading. Again, like you said, basically to just add one bay. And again, because it is a hillside standard, that is really where my concern comes and where I have trouble supporting the application as it stands. Anybody want to attempt a motion? Or any further questions of staff, comment?
I'll just add one further comment. I sense I'm in the minority, but on the cut issue, just if the notion is one of safety as opposed to aesthetics, as Commissioner Barnett noted, Soils and Geo is going to have to sign off on this project before it goes forward. So I think that mitigates against a finding that the cut is too excessive, in my view.
No, it's a good perspective. It's a good perspective.
No, we don't talk a lot about precedent. This is an accessory building, a rebuild. Had this been a new construction, the cut allowance actually is higher. But now we're dealing with an accessory building after many years. And so again, that's why I have a tendency to hold fast to that standard. And one of the questions I asked staff when I went in for my regular visit was, what other examples do we have of this where we have made, a major exception to a standard like this? And it was very hard to come up with one. And so my concern is that we start doing this. What's the standard? So I'm not typically a black and white, hard, fast guy, but in this case, that's really where I am positioned.
Yeah, I was just trying to think back through the years on the same, when we had made such an exception for something like an accessory dwelling. I actually couldn't think of any examples during my tenure, but does anybody want to venture a motion or further discussion? Okay.
Well, I'll propose a motion. With respect to this agenda item concerning 16511 Cypress Way, a request to approve demolition of an existing structure and construct a new accessory structure exceeding 1,000 square feet, etc. APN 532-24004. Although I could make the required findings for CEQA, I cannot make the findings concerning the elements, the other elements, including the hillside, development standards and guidelines. And I'll ask staff if that includes the grading is prohibited by the specific plan as well. The grading violation.
Sorry, that's lives in the hillside development standards and guidelines. So the specific plan, this is in that area, but those specific provisions are in the guidelines.
Okay, so I could not make the findings regarding the guidelines and standards. And for that reason, I propose to my fellow commissioners that the application be denied.
Thank you. Any comment or second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? And I'll call the question. All in favor? Aye. And those opposed? Okay. Passes 4-1. Are there any appeal rights?
Yes, thank you. There are appeal rights. Anyone who's not satisfied with the decision of the Planning Commission can appeal that decision to the Town Council. Forms are available online in the clerk's office. There's a fee for filing the appeal, and the appeal must be filed within 10 days.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. As we go into the next item, I actually have to recuse myself, so I will be turning over chairing of the Planning Commission to Commissioner Raspy.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I will now call our next matter, item number 6. That is, consider a request for approval to demolish existing commercial structures, construct a multifamily live-work development of 55 units, a conditional use permit for a live-work development, a condominium vesting tentative map, site improvements requiring a grading permit, and removal of large protected trees under Senate Bill 330 on property zoned CHHEOZ, located at 15349 through 15367 Los Gatos Boulevard, APNs 424-19-048 and 424-19-049. Architecture and Site Application S-24-015. Conditional Use Permit U-24-006. And Subdivision Application M-24-008. Property owner, Jonathan Peck. Applicant is City Ventures. And the project manager is Sean Mullen. May I see from a show of hands, commissioners, those who have visited the property? Thank you. And any disclosures? We already have one recusal. Yes, Commissioner Brown.
Well, this is an over-disclosure, but perhaps some decades ago I represented Dr. Peck with respect to this building, but I certainly don't think that that would affect my judgment today. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Mr. Paulson, I see Mr. Mullins not here this evening. Will you begin delivering the report for staff?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I
Thank you so
will.
much.
I will deliver the staff report. Good evening, Commissioners. And first, I'm going to turn it over to the Town Attorney, so she can provide background on the regulatory framework applicable to this project.
Thank you. This is a Senate Bill 330 project that is also seeking to utilize state density bonus law. So I've prepared a brief presentation to go over what those laws provide. Senate Bill 330 authorizes applicants to submit what's called a preliminary application. And that preliminary application, once submitted, vests an applicant to all of the town's development standards that were in place at the time that a complete preliminary application was submitted to the town. Next slide. Okay, so this project vested to development standards that were in place. While the project would be eligible to utilize builder's remedy, the project has opted to rely solely on the state density bonus law. Next slide, please. As the Commission may recall, the state density bonus law allows for increased densities in exchange for applicants providing different levels of affordability in their projects. And so once they've met the required threshold of affordable units, applicants can request density bonuses, incentives and concessions, and waivers. This particular applicant is not seeking increased density. The applicant is, however, seeking incentives, concessions, and waivers, which is authorized by the state density bonus law, even though an applicant is not seeking a density bonus. Next slide, please. Incentives and concessions basically include items that will result in cost reductions, and the intent of the legislation is that cost reductions enable developers to provide affordable housing. Other examples of incentives or concessions would be approval of mixed-use zoning, reductions in setbacks, square footage, parking, etc. Next slide, please. In addition to incentives and concessions, applicants are entitled to seek unlimited waivers of development standards that would have the effect of quote unquote physically precluding the development as proposed at the allowed density. Next slide. And so that is an overview of SB 330 and density bonus law. And I'm available if the Commission has any follow-up questions.
Commissioners, any questions from staff attorney? Okay, Mr. Paulson, then we'll hear our staff report.
Great, thank you. So as proposed, they are looking to demolish the existing commercial structures on the site. It's approximately an acre and a half site. They're looking to construct 55 multifamily units, 4 of which will be live-work units, which is somewhat unique for the town. In those 55 units, there will be 8 BMP units, as evidenced in the staff report. The makeup of the units is there are studio units, 2-bedroom units, and 3-bedroom units. The height meets the max height of the housing element overlay zone, which is 45 feet. These range, I think, somewhere between 41.5 and 45 feet. So they do comply with that. Access currently is taken from Los Gatos Boulevard. However, this access will be taken solely from Garden Lane. The parking requirement, they're entitled through the density bonus to reduced parking standards. And so this proposed project is required to have 79 pursuant to those regulations. They actually have 88. and there are actually 9 guest spaces. I went back and counted them, Commissioner Stump, so that they weren't added. Those 2 on the cover page weren't additive. There are 9 guest parking spaces. Ms. Whelan spoke about concessions and incentives. They're seeking a concession to the BMP program guidelines. They don't have, for instance, any 3-bedroom BMPs. The BMP guidelines ask for, kind of a mix similar to what the other units are. And so they don't have 3-bedroom units. And so then they also don't have some of the larger units, which are 2 of those components. And then a number of waivers, setbacks, driveway length, garage width, and then a number of waivers for the objective design standards. And those are outlined in, I believe, Exhibit 9 of your staff report. The project was evaluated to make sure that we could comply with no net loss law. This site will not render the need for the town to rezone any sites at this point, as again, included in your staff report. So those findings are included in the findings, and we can move forward from that standpoint. And then lastly, an initial study was prepared. Following the completion of that initial study, it was determined that they were eligible for CEQA exemptions through Section 15162 and 15168. And there were an addendum and a desk item for this matter tonight, and then staff's available. We have our environmental consultant available, and then we have Parks and Public Works staff via the town engineer and traffic engineer available as well. And that concludes my report.
Thank you for that report. Commissioners, any questions for staff, including our consultants? Commissioner Stump.
I continue to have concerns about CEQA and the study that we are doing. And at the commission meeting a couple of meetings ago, I brought up the whole issue of cumulative impact. And as we take a look at what has happened to us, it's unprecedented in Los Gatos history probably to have these significant number of projects, 15, many of them that do not meet the town standards. And by the way, I'm not pointing that out as an issue. I'm just saying that's the reality, that we've got greater densities, and even in the Los Gatos Boulevard area now, we've got greater clustering that's taking place. And so I guess my question, at what point in time do we consider the impacts substantial and impacts or change circumstances to our situation? And that probably ties back to our 2040 program EIR. It does not describe the environment that we are in today. And again, I'm not trying to pick on any one project. I'm just looking at the entire program that we're looking at now. And so I don't even know what kind of question that I'm asking you, Mr. Paulson, but I've got concerns about our CEQA study.
I can start, and then the town CEQA consultant may have information to add. The director and I, were both present at the study session at which the concern about cumulative impacts was raised. And since then, we've had conversations with a few CEQA consultants about the best way to analyze those cumulative impacts. We're still in those discussions. One alternative would be to prepare a supplement to the EIR that was done for the 2040 general plan. Another alternative would be to enhance the discussion of cumulative impacts that's done for each individual project. And we haven't landed on the ideal solution just yet, but we are having those conversations.
Just a follow-up question. Realize this is the $64,000 question, but how long do you think those discussions will take to reach a conclusion?
I mean, I hesitate to give a firm date, but I suspect we could have a recommendation within a month.
And additionally, through the chair, so I'll have our environmental consultant add some additional information, because I think there's the cumulative impact of if and when all of these or some of these get approved. That's really the action point. And then there's this idea of, in that group, what subset, an individual project, a group of 2 or 3 projects, 10 projects out of the 15, when does it really become cumulatively considerable, right, from an impact perspective. But let me allow our CEQA consultant, Mr. Papani, to speak.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please, go ahead.
Excellent. Good evening, Chair, members of the Commission. This is Nick Papani with Rainey Planning and Management.
If you could just speak a little more directly into your mouthpiece or microphone, whichever you're using.
Will do. Is that a little better?
So much better. Thank you.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Again, Nick Papani, Vice President with Rainey. We are under contract with the town to prepare the environmental analysis for the proposed project. And I just wanted to add a little bit further information for your consideration. And that would be with respect to the analysis here that we prepared. The analysis is looking at, is the scope of this particular project within the general plan EIR. And the way we look at that is to determine whether the project would create any new significant impacts not previously identified in the general plan EIR, or if the project would substantially increase the severity of an impact previously identified in the general plan EIR. With respect to the question of the builder's remedy applications and particularly the concentration of certain projects along the Los Gatos Boulevard corridor, I would suggest from an environmental impact standpoint that, kind of the particular issue there is one of increased traffic, of increased congestion, and that, directly relates to level of service and the amount of congestion within the area, that particular area of the town. The state has shifted, as you probably well know, with respect to how to determine traffic impact significance in CEQA. The state has shifted from level of service and congestion to vehicle miles traveled. And so, as you're probably aware, the 2040 General Plan EIR determines traffic impact significance by vehicle miles traveled. And so that's the focus that we had in this analysis for this project. So, so really the question of the concentration of these other projects and that cumulative effect, while it's an important consideration, it's not one for this environmental document because it's related to primarily level of service and congestion. In terms of effects on vehicle miles traveled, the industry standard guidance, which comes from the California Air Pollution Control Officers Association, actually shows data that by increasing residential densities, you actually reduce VMT. And that has to do with the different product types that come along with these denser projects. They tend to have residents that travel less. So, so we're comfortable with the current analysis that that adequately addresses potential effects of the cumulative projects, which isn't one of congestion. And if there's any other concerns related to other potential environmental topics, I'm happy to address those. But I just kind of wanted to focus at least on traffic, which I think is a primary consideration of this increase, and how it's really one of congestion and level of service, and that's not relevant to the current environmental analysis.
All right, thank you for that response. Before you hang up, commissioners, any further questions either for this speaker or for any other member of staff? Oh, okay, let's go, Commissioner Burnett to begin, and I'll then go down the line.
Okay, so thank you. A question for staff here. So how can we move forward with these developments when we're contemplating maybe thinking about the cumulative impact study or a supplement to our 2040 general plan, when we have to take into consideration all the projects that we're going to be faced with, and that would go into one grouping? So how can we single out one when that one may actually become included in the total picture? And not only that, I mean, the 2040 general plan, as we know, did not have all the evidence that we have now with our builder's remedy projects, our SB 330, density bonus, builder's remedy. I mean, we're talking a lot here. And I know when I attended the planning commissioner's sort of retreat, it was quite a subject that CEQA is actually our friend, and that if we have questions, and if our lead, which is our city, you know, the fair argument standard is also something that comes into play here. If it's obvious that there's going to be issues, it needs to be looked at. So my question is, how can we sort of carve out this one project when it may be looming that what would happen if a decision is made to do a cumulative impact study, then would this project be sort of let to go ahead and not be part of the solution? Thank you.
My thoughts on this project are that it's consistent with the density and the height that was proposed in the housing element overlay zone, and the effects of that have already been analyzed. And so it doesn't seem like there's more to study if something is consistent with what was a program that was already adopted. I do think there's a difference with the builder's remedy projects that are not consistent with density or heights that were previously analyzed. But there are provisions in the State Housing Accountability Act, you know, that the town will need to be conscious of, you know, that prohibit unreasonable delays. And so I think it'll just have to be something that is discussed project by project.
And through the chair, also Mr. Papani might be able to offer some additional comments.
Please.
Yes, thank you again. Just to add to that, I would just note that the CEQA guidelines in the guidance for cumulative impact analysis in section 15130, it does clearly allow for the recognition that not every single project contributes to a combined significant impact. So let's take, for example, aesthetics. You know, you might have several of these builders remedy projects that have increased height above and beyond allowable standards. However, this particular project that's compliant with the general plan and the zone from a heights perspective doesn't incrementally contribute towards a potential significant aesthetic effect. And so it is allowable to determine this project's particular incremental effect to a potential combined impact as less than significant. And that's what I would suggest is the case here.
Thank you. Commissioner Barnett.
Yes, this could be for staff or Mr. Paponi. As I understand, he's making the point that our current CEQA analysis for the general plan used vehicle miles traveled, but the LOS applies. And I'm just wondering if you could explain how that came about.
Well, I'll start. So prior to state law being modified, we always looked at level of service, which is intersection congestion, as Mr. Papani mentioned. State law changed, and from a CEQA perspective, they moved to the vehicle miles traveled. So from a CEQA perspective, that's all that gets analyzed from a traffic perspective. In addition to the VMT, we also still require the LOS traffic impact analysis. And so that is not a CEQA issue, that's a project issue, and obviously there's information on the number of trips in the staff report. So from a traffic perspective, to put it more plainly, what Mr. Papani was saying is, from a CEQA perspective, traffic is not an issue because there's not a VMT issue. In addition, we actually adopted significant overriding considerations for VMT in our 2040 general plan because we knew it couldn't be mitigated.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Stump, I think you had a follow-up question.
This was, again, about the housing element overlay zone. Could you just remind us what the density was laid out in that zone?
In the housing element overlay zone for this site,
exactly.
30 to 40 dwelling units per acre.
What is the density for this particular project? I've not seen kind of a single calculation for that. I've seen it in the drawing, but it was not calculated the way I was expecting it to be calculated.
Yeah, so there's a number, I think it's somewhere in the low 30s is how it's calculated currently. And yes, depending on whether you're looking at gross, net, are we including the roadways in that calculation, because typically we exempt those. Are we counting the BMPs in that calculation, because we have another general plan or housing element policy that says we don't count them as density, whereas with typically for these projects, we are counting them as density. So there are some nuances there, but they are in that range from staff's perspective.
Thank you. Commissioners, any further questions for staff? Yes, Commissioner Burnett.
Sorry, a follow-up. If I'm reading the staff report correctly, the town does not have a definition for live-work units. And, excuse me, but I'm not good at reading plans, so the question I have is, how are those two units different from other units?
I think it's 4, and the applicant can probably provide you some additional information, but generally there's, in the 30,000 foot level, there's an area that can be used or would be used for a commercial operation of some sort, which is directly adjacent to or abutting residential unit. So, but the applicant probably can provide you more details.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions for staff? All right, seeing none, I'll open up the public portion of this hearing and invite the applicant, who I believe is Pamela Niting, N-I-E-T-I-N-G, to come forward. Thank you. Please state your name for the record, and you'll have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you so much. My name is Pamela Salas Niting. But first, I wanted to thank you. I was going to thank the chair and vice chair, but they're not here. So thank you, planning commissioners, for being here today, and also to staff. I know Sean couldn't be here today, so hopefully he's not Zooming because he's supposed to be taking a family vacation. But also to staff, to James and Mike and the many others that have worked with me. Next slide, please. Like I was mentioning, my name is Pamela Salas Niting, and I'm vice president at City Ventures. I also am actually a planning commissioner in my hometown, so I know what it's like to have a love for the home that you live in and the dedication that it takes to be here. For those of you that don't know much about City Ventures, we are a sustainable local Bay Area builder that primarily focuses on infill developments and developments that are close to transit. Our company actually came to life as part of a core belief in creating partnerships with municipalities. Speaking of partnerships, and before I dive into the actual project, I feel very honored that I got to work in partnership, I feel, with the town of Los Gatos on a site that was actually identified in the housing element. So for me, the goal of today is to breathe life into the vision that the town had for this property long ago. The 1.5 acre site is located at the corner of Los Gatos Boulevard and Garden Lane, approximately 1 mile south of Highway 85 and 1 mile north of Blossom Hill Road. And it is currently home to an existing shopping center. Here's a quick sneak peek. The town did beautiful rendering, so I just kind of wanted to walk you through the existing conditions of Los Gatos Boulevard West. Los Gatos Boulevard North, you can see the proposed versus the existing. Garden Lane on the east view. And then Garden Lane on the south view. The current access to the site is off of Los Gatos Boulevard in its existing condition. You can see that there's 3 driveway cuts. And now to for the the show today, which is the project. So it's 55 for sale all electric townhomes that vary from studios to 3 bedrooms, and square footages ranging from 300 to 1,500 square feet. The project, as Mr. Paulson had noted before, is providing 8 below market rate units, 4 at low AMI and 4 at moderate. Along Los Gatos Boulevard, I marked them here, Commissioner. Those are the live-work units. And we designed the project to have 2 access points plus the parking lot on the north side that Mr. Paulson had discussed also. And my favorite part is at the center of the project is the central green space, which I feel like is really the heart of the project. Here's a better image to show the site plan against existing conditions. As you can see, all of the existing site used to only have access to Los Gatos Boulevard. We flipped it around, so now it's off of Garden Lane. An important aspect of the project was access to VTA, and most importantly, we provided pedestrian connectivity throughout and from Garden Lane to Los Gatos. I'm going to talk a little fast because I only have 1 minute left. As I mentioned before, the heart of the project is that open space, which was really curated with this development in mind. And you can see that we also included a bulb out at Garden Lane, and that was to provide an extended sidewalk to complement access to Oak Hill Park that is actually kitty corner to the site. Here's a few imagery of our green space. And then last but not least, I probably won't have time, but is the architecture. We know that the architecture in downtown Los Gatos has a special place and influence. And so for our proposed architecture, we brought a little piece of downtown to Los Gatos Boulevard, all while keeping it unique. So you see here the historic Austrian woodwork balcony, the next slide, the exposed timber framing on the eaves, and then the next slide, the exterior brick cladding design. And 6 seconds left to go. So thank you so much for listening to me today.
Thank you so much for those comments. Before you sit down, I'm sure my fellow commissioners have 1 or 2 questions for you. Commissioners. Commissioner Stump.
By the way, thank you for your presentation, very helpful. And thank you also for the feedback that our consulting architect did give you, and that I do believe it was seriously considered. I realize you're dealing with constraints, but it was nice to see the response. That said, I'd like to just talk about the front setback just a little bit, because I know that was a subject that was brought up by the consulting architect, and he considered it to be a concern that setbacks appear smaller and more rigid. This was his quote, than other similar and existing setbacks along the street frontage, even including, and he was speaking to Los Gatos Boulevard. And I know that you've made some adjustments. Can you share those adjustments with us?
Yes.
And do those, well, let me stop there with that question. I might have a follow-up, but,
okay.
Can you share those adjustments with
Absolutely.
us? Thank you.
I will do my best, but I also have our lead architect here. But what we did for Los Gatos Boulevard from an architectural perspective, since we were running out of space and there was the minimum density that we had to hit to bring your vision to life, we added additional facade elements along Los Gatos Boulevard to activate that. So you'll see those like special pops of architecture. That's me being a novice. I'm a civil engineer. I apologize. Is there anything you want to add to what we did? And that's why, by the way, the units are facing Los Gatos Boulevard. And structurally speaking, because that's what I can speak to, we even stepped it because there's quite a grade change from Los Gatos to Garden Lane. So we added in those elements to make sure that you could face and be present and activate Los Gatos Boulevard instead of being sunken in.
Thank you. And sir, before you begin, if you could state your name for the record. Thank you.
Good evening, Dan Hale with Hunt Hale Jones Architects. I appreciate Mr. Cannon's comments. He's reviewed our work in the past. It's always very insightful and very appropriate. Maybe along with what Pam was talking about, one of the things that he spoke about and we talked to Sean about, I think he gave some examples of some other townhome projects in the area and up and down Los Gatos Boulevard, actually. But in our opinion, they were also in areas that were a little less dense and more residential feeling. And we felt like this is kind of in the core of a commercial area. And so we wanted to bring a little more of I don't want you to take this the wrong way, more of an urban front to it, which typically has a little less movement. So between the constraints that Pam mentioned and looking at where this was in Los Gatos Boulevard, cars going by at 30, 35 miles an hour, we wanted to make it a little more of an urban building.
Commissioner Stump,
I
have a
guess
follow-up?
a
Yes.
question again would just be, so the setbacks are running from 5 feet to what?
About 8 to 10 if you look at the recess in the building.
Sorry, you said 5 feet
To about 10 feet.
To 10 feet. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
Commissioner Barnett?
Yes, I wonder if you could respond to my earlier question about the design of the work units.
Yes. So this is something that we've done in other projects. So essentially, the unit is almost encompassed within the actual housing unit, but it's kind of like a shopkeeper almost. You know, back east, where people would come out their front door and then walk into their own little unit. Because we were taking away, because the commercial is going away, we were trying to come up with a really creative way to bring some economic vitality by way of anything creative. And this is where I'm hoping that those new residents, because the units are going to be sold together, this is where I hope that creativity of, there might be a mom like myself who wants to, work out of her home, but be able to sell something. Like, this is where I'm hoping that creativity can come into play. But it's a completely separate unit that has an interstitial door, Commissioner. So when you're in your unit, you can literally just pop right in and then pop back out. And it's the four that face Los Gatos Boulevard.
Thank you, Commissioner Burnett.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so to follow through, I'm concerned about the frontage, the setback, because we have a very large project going on Los Gatos Boulevard right now, and it's 15 feet setback. And it is very looming and very, I think, obtrusive. I mean, it's quite large, and it's just right, you feel like it's right on the street. And, I find your definition of urban area, that definition is characterized by high population density and infrastructure of built environment. And I don't think that describes Los Gatos, actually. And even though you're at the end of Los Gatos Boulevard, I think we still need to keep the character and feeling of the town. And we have to be reminded that there is a neighborhood behind this development. Mm-hmm. So I think we should try and continue on the neighborhood feeling. So, and our architect, Mr. Cannon, who's great, did mention that, and you did mention that it was recessed 5 to 8 feet. So when you're talking about recess, what are you talking about, the doorway, or where is this recess? Because you said it'd be 5 to 8 feet.
Yeah, so I did want to say, I don't know if we can go back to the site plan. Perhaps it is just to have something to speak to.
Yeah, it wasn't in the book. I didn't.
It is slide 10, I believe. That's a good one. In order to soften it, Commissioner, you can see I hear you about we're not in New York where you want the facade just hitting you like a big brick wall, which is kind of what you have that feeling along Garden, because there's just giant walls all throughout Garden Lane. And so the landscaping here and the little walkways and pathways that walk up to the units and the 24-inch, 15-inch gallon trees, or maybe it was 24-inch, it was all very intentional to help soften the feel. So it's still, while we couldn't give the setback that the architect wanted with the white picket fence, I mean, everybody wants that, we did make it very, very intentional to provide those individual walkways, the landscape pockets, the trees, so you have all those elements in a smaller size, but all still meaningful.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't quite think it would satisfy my need for it to have more of a setback rather than just 5 feet. I think that's very close to the street. And the next concern I have, and our architect did bring that up also, you know, what we always strive for is individuality of the different little homes, which are, you know, and I compliment your design, and I appreciate you working mostly with our architect's design and suggestions. So I do compliment you on that. And I also compliment you that you're not using builder's remedy, but you're working with the town and helping to develop a really nice, you know, project here, which others have, and it works very well. So, but my next question would be, the way, I know you have 3 building materials, and the town architect suggested using those building materials to differentiate between each of the, you know, like you saw, like you said in the packet, to sort of give a feeling of some articulation there and some feeling, I mean, it just softens the whole look of the building, I think. So that would be an important, and it wouldn't be a hard thing to do, to use each material on one different of the units. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Did you want to respond to that comment?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not sure there was a question, but if you wanted to say anything.
Sorry, I apologize. I thought you were asking what are the materials that we're using, but I hear you about making sure that we have that variety, that undulation of the different architectural materials.
Would you consider accepting or going along with our architect's suggestion in that regard?
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, please.
May I? If it's a strong opinion of the commission, we can come back and investigate. It was a conscious decision when we were designing the facades not to do the individual units. This product type is narrower than some other townhome unit examples that he provided. Our unit width is typically 16 feet. Many times a normal townhome that we think of as 20 to 21 feet. The other thing, I'm going to go back to my view of the context. It's in a more of a commercial area. The buildings are larger scale. They have larger pieces of massing to them. And so we're trying to fit in a little bit in the existing neighborhood where we provide larger pieces of massing to the building instead of chopping it up into individual small pieces. So we had a discussion with planning, but interested to hear your comments.
May I ask, Commissioner, would you want us to try to do that along Los Gatos Boulevard proper to kind of show that variety up front? Is that the street?
Well, you know, from what I keep referring back to Mr. Cannon's sort of suggestion, I think his suggestions are very good. I think it would soften the building. And again, this isn't an urban city. This is a small town.
Yeah.
And I think it would be more pleasing to the citizens of Los Gatos to have more charm associated with it. Not that your building is not a nice design.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying you could go further.
So why don't we do this? I can absolutely look at the finish schedule and kind of see how we can make each little unit pop a little bit more. Part of what we're trying to do with planning was just kind of have it feel more uniform, but that is something that we can look into. I will take that comment.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that.
Commissioner Stump.
Parking is truly the unwinnable situation for the developer, for the town, and certainly for the residents when there's going to be a significant development around a residential area. Our code would require an additional 40 spaces. And again, I'm not debating that. I'm just stating the fact that our code would have said, hey, there needs to be 40 additional parking spaces tied to this development. I guess my big concern, and maybe you can share maybe another development you have, because it seems like probably 1.5, 2 cars per unit, where I guess it was 1.5 cars you had, because not everyone has a 2-car garage. But there's 88 parking spaces for the private garages, and then 9 guest parking spaces. Over there busting my chops. And what's been your experience with these reduced parking requirements? And I'm just going to call it overflow.
Yeah.
Because I've got to believe there's going to be overflow. And
Yeah.
so what have you seen in your other developments, and where does that overflow go? And I know the answer is it depends, but I'm just interested.
I have a better answer than depends. So in the beginning, when I introduced who City Ventures was, there's a reason why City Ventures always chooses sites in infill developments close to transit, is because our units, as I spoke to before, they're between 300 and 1,500 square feet. They're intentionally made small. So the Casita Coalition is an organization that deals with ADUs, and they talk about the element that's been proven of affordability by design. There's also what we've seen, parking by design. And so when you have these very specific infill locations, and that's why I brought up the fact that we have all that accessibility, you know, throughout the bike racks, that was important, short-term, long-term, and the fact that the transit spot, the VTA bus stop is right in front of our site. That's for a reason, like why we're looking out for those sites, because we're not building big sites. And yours truly used to live in the city in a 700 square foot apartment with 2 babies, and we walked everywhere and took transit. And so I've seen it work with a certain generation, and particularly when you're offering those size units and when you're offering that accessibility also to transit. So it's better than depends.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Burnett.
So another question. So there are no one-level units, correct?
These are 3-story townhomes, you're right.
Right. So for someone who's disabled or the elderly even, and with no elevator, was that?
You're right. There's no elevator in a 3-story townhome. It's just like, you know, a lot of the homes here are also two stories. But by code, we do have 10% of the units that are ADA accessible. And they make certain provisions for like larger bathrooms. My brother's in a wheelchair, so like being able to move around in a wheelchair, et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Stun? Oh, I'm sorry. There's a no more. Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation.
thank
You'll
you.
have an opportunity at the end for a closing presentation, I think up to 3 minutes. I'll now open up the public portion of the matter. If you are in the audience and you haven't had a chance yet and you wish to speak, please fill out one of the yellow cards. I have several here before me. When it's your time to speak, please come to the podium, state your name, adjust the microphone as appropriate. As you can see, we've had some issue with that tonight, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. I will begin then with James Paulson. Thank you, Mr. Paulson.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is James Paulson. I live at 253 Oakdale Drive, which is the corner directly across from the back of this proposed addition, where there's a fire hydrant on the corner. That's my home. My wife and I bought our home just before my son was born in 1983, and he's lived there ever since. And now he and his wife also live with us with our grandson, and our granddaughter's there often to visit. And we go down to the play lot all the time. And one of our concerns, obviously, is the traffic. We already have huge traffic problems on Garden Lane. It's a back way for everyone to get through our neighborhood, whether it's Highland Oaks, where Kendra lives, or going up through Benedict, all those, typical routes. So obviously, this is going to impact us if this goes through. About 30 years ago, there was proposed to put a landscaping or a gardening place there, and it was denied to have access out in Garden Lane because of traffic. So now here we are putting in a huge unit, which is going to be way more traffic. The street already has a huge amount of parking issues from the problems with the people who work at the car wash. They park along our street. We have street trimmers, tree people illegally parking on our street. We have RVs parking there all the time. So obviously we're concerned about the traffic, the impact on our neighborhood, having this big increase on there. And with owner builders being able to push their projects through, I don't know why the city needs to push this one through before we satisfy the owner-builders ones. So those are our big concerns for myself, my neighbors, my children, our grandchildren, third generation here, trying to enjoy this. And as we keep building up and urbanizing around us, this is proposed. Now, catty-cornered to that, to the ACE is supposed to be one eventually, as you know, is one of the 15 projects. And then the big one where the George Brown workout place behind the McDonald's is and the Eric is, we're being, claustrophobed by all of this, and what used to be a nice neighborhood for us, a nice residential neighborhood when Leonard McGammon lived there across the street from us. And he was 83 when we moved in 83. And, now we're just going into an urban environment, which is not what we wanted. And we went to sell our home years ago, and people said, the realtors said, yeah, you bought on the wrong side of the boulevard. Well, apparently it's just getting worse. So thank you
for
very
those
much.
comments. Before you sit down, commissioners, any questions? Yes, Commissioner Stump.
What's your on-street parking like now in your neighborhood?
It's terrible. Garden Lane is completely packed all the time. Like I say, with people, I understand the people with the car wash need a place to park, and they're parking along there. The tree trimmers come in with their chippers all the time, and they park there. Big Creek Lumber from Santa Cruz, every time there's a big job, they come in because it's right off the freeway. They'll park their double trailers there, and they'll take off and unload one, come back, hook up their next one, and this is at 7 in the morning, waking us up. And I like to sleep in a little more than I used to. And I used to always be up at 6 and drive up to Palo Alto to work. And I was part of that traffic, which, changing this to vehicle mileage travel versus the actual impact of, the insanity of the traffic there. My wife's a retired nurse. We were very conscious of all the emergency vehicles coming through there all the time. So yeah, it's been pretty bad.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any of the commissioners? No, thank you so much for your comments.
You're very welcome.
Next speaker, Karen Yamamoto, please, if you'll come to the podium. And you'll have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karen Yamamoto. I live off of Benedict Lane, which is right off of Garden Lane. I am speaking on behalf of myself and a couple of my neighbors who could not be here. We're not too happy with the fact that this is an SB 330 build that should not be approved right now, only because the SB 330s we want to have them all together when you guys decide what to do, because our infrastructure is going to be infected. We've already had sewage backed up into our homes from the North 40. We've already had impact on the North 40. In all of our power outages, we had 7 just from the first phase in 1 year. And you think another development that has waivers is going to take into consideration our needs, our infrastructure needs? I'm looking at the parking. Parking is, with this 2 7-story buildings that from Newtown, I know we're not supposed to discuss any one building, but all of there are 6 right there. They're in the middle of it. I guarantee these 3 SB 330s are gonna have an impact on us. It needs to be put together with put on hold, don't approve it right away, but take into consideration CEQA, how this is going to affect our lives. It's not just traffic, it's our lives. It's our health, all of these constructions. Whether it is cheaply done or not, it needs to be analyzed with CEQA. It needs to be really looked at as a whole, not as individual projects. Please do not approve this today, but take into consideration that, I don't know, I got one other, I'm running out of time. I have one other question. What is the height limits? Because their buildings are 54 high. I thought our height limitation was 42.
Thank you so much. Before you sit down, Commissioners, any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, again, thank you for your attendance and your comments tonight. My final yellow card is Mr. Fago.
Lee Fago, speaking as a almost 30-year resident of the town of Los Gatos, and I'm not representing any group. I'm speaking just as an individual in town. I believe that Ms. Yamamoto made some very good points about considering this development in the context of all the other developments that are being proposed along the boulevard, which is facing some issues of the water table underneath that area, that street, all along there. The fact that it lies along a earthquake fault zone, a series of earthquake fault zones along there, and that's going to also be impacted by these other developments. The other infrastructure concerns of the utilities, including sewage, water, electricity, and so forth, are all going to be impacted. I believe the design that is being proposed is interesting, and in other areas that are zoned for 45-foot heights, this development would be more appropriate than what we see along the boulevard. I appreciate the fact that they've considered the variety in the design, so that it's not so impactful as looking at this brick wall, for example. But the fact that it's only about 5 to 8 feet back, that's just 3 rows of seats away, but from the street to the building that goes up 45 feet. That doesn't look like anything in the town of Los Gatos. And once we make an exception for something like this, then the bar is lowered to that level. So please, to the point that Ms. Yamamoto made of consider this in the context of all the other submissions, and then make a judgment and a recommendation makes sense. But in the meantime, like I said, I think that the design is in an area that does already have an allowance for 45 feet with a proper setback, not 5 to 8 feet, makes more sense. But that site on the boulevard with the infrastructure challenges, the CEQA considerations, it's not a good fit. So my recommendation to that point is delay, refer this to another consideration, another site consideration, but do not approve it going forward as it stands on that site. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before you sit down, Mr. Fago, any questions from our commissioners? Seeing none, no, thank you again for your attendance this evening. Those are all the yellow cards I have. Mr. Paulson, anybody on Zoom?
Thank you, Chair. I do not see any hands raised on Zoom.
Okay. Then I will give the applicant an opportunity to please approach again. You'll have up to 3 minutes to address some of the comments you heard or answer any questions of staff. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm actually very thankful for my education as a licensed civil engineer, so I feel like I can actually speak a little bit of eloquently on this. From a utility perspective, we hired some of the best engineers, CBG, and all of this was looked at thoroughly, from capacity, sizing, etc. Also, we did a lot of geotechnical studies, and we also are following and abiding by the AP Act. And so we had 2 different types of geotechnical engineers just to make sure that we had the correct findings about what Mr. Leif, I think that was his name, had discussed about the faults that are frankly a lot in the area that we have. With regards to CEQA, and I know that staff can discuss this, the project is looked at individually and also within the context of the housing element when it's tearing off of. That's the beauty about CEQA law. That it looks at it. And I know that Mike Froman can also speak to this, but we not only did the VMT and the LOS, but Mike also recommended, which I'm very thankful that he did driveway counts along Garden Lane because we were concerned. I don't know if Mike, if you want to talk about that, but we did that specifically for the different concerns of the neighbors. And also one little, I have a minute left. And then one quick item about, the last 2 weeks I've come at different hours of the day to kind of see what traffic patterns are. And if I may say that there are actually different traffic patterns based on the end use, meaning like if it's residential versus commercial. And so I know that it may feel like a lot, and I don't know, Mike, if you want to talk about the driveway counts, where there wasn't any impact when they looked at that. But we did care about the neighbors on Garden Lane, so we did do that. I think that was all of the comments, was neighborhood, but yeah, neighborhood parking, traffic, utilities, and then geotechnical perspectives, I think is what I heard. And Mike, don't feel that you need to come up. I just want to let them know that you did do that.
Right, thank you. And actually, before you sit down, commissioners, any follow-up questions to applicant? Actually, as long as I have you, 2 questions. So the currently existing site, the egress and ingress is from Los Gatos Boulevard. You have essentially closed that off, except for pedestrian way, and put it onto Garden Lane. Did you ever consider, as part of this project, having the driveways come back onto Los Gatos Boulevard? Was that a consideration, or does the site make that impractical, impossible, or was there a reason you didn't do it that way?
Yeah, it had to do with traffic and congestion. So we wanted to make sure there was fluid in and out. And again, when we looked at it, you're looking at it not from a commercial. So in a commercial, you have a lot of in out during the day versus residential, you have different hours. And that's why yours truly today sat outside of the site on Garden Lane looking at that cute little park, because I also have young children, just trying to see, and all of the workers were gone by then, right? So I just kind of sat there, and that was very important for us. And that's why we had not just one in out, we had 2 in outs plus a third for the parking. That's why you have 1, 2, 3 to hopefully have a fluid movement of vehicles, because we didn't want to impact the neighbors. Oh, and then Commissioner Burnett, the 5 feet is actually only in one part of a pinch point of the building, where the edge of it, but when the units that face the boulevard are 15 feet from the face of curb to the face of the building. So I did want to say that. We just verified it right now.
Thank you. And one more follow-up question. You're asking for many waivers, but you're only asking for one concession, and that is the BMP count. You don't want to offer a 3-bedroom low or moderate income unit. Can you discuss why that's not part of the mix? I would think having a larger unit for a low-income family would be desirable in that facility.
Yeah, that was strictly because essentially whenever this is a bit of conjecture, I'm not speaking for all builders, but I've worked for a few. The BMR units, essentially all builders, it comes at a loss. So we have a negative. And so normally that's why density is important, because you're trying to spread the cost. So in this case, it was literally for financial reasons, to make the project affordable, to be able. One thing that City Ventures prides himself on is to not do an in lieu fee and to build the homes on the site versus paying for the town or cities to have money that just sits there and then no one comes in and builds the affordable housing.
No, I appreciate the response.
Okay, thank you so
I think
much.
Commissioner Stump had a follow-up.
Yeah, I just want to get a clarification. You were speaking about setbacks once again,
Yes.
and you said there was only one instance of a 5-foot setback because it's kind of a pinch point, but then everything else went to 15 feet?
That was, so we just looked at, because I think Commissioner Burnett asked about Los Gatos Boulevard, right?
Yeah, exactly, Los Gatos Boulevard.
Yeah, so
right.
that's what and I apologize that I didn't put that particular exhibit on my slides, but there's a pinch point that's closer to the Rotten Robbie. That's the side of the building that gets too close, but otherwise we just measured. It's 15 feet from the curb to the face of the building. Did I say that right, Dan? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions? No, thank you again for your presentation this evening. I'll close the public portion of this matter and open up the discussion to my fellow commissioners for questions, comments. Feel free to ask questions of staff, any staff members we haven't heard of, or discuss among ourselves. Commissioners, I open the floor to you. Commissioner Stump.
Let's start with transportation. The project will need to implement a transportation demand management plan. Can you illuminate for us a bit what is in a transportation demand management plan?
That would be included as part of the conditions of approval, and it's mandated because there's 10 or more units. As was noted, there's no VMT impact because this project is consistent with the general plan and the housing element. And in the traffic study, it did show that the density was like 35.25 units per acre. So it was within the 30 to 40 units per acre density of the general plan.
Mr. Vroman, can you give the commission an idea of what types of items are used in a TDM?
Yes, in the TDM plan, there are amenities they can have for to facilitate bike use, the bus use. They can issue bus passes or discount passes for residents, or try and work something out with VTA, especially since they're so close to the bus stop. They also can do things to encourage the live-work units, or something that will enhance, that will reduce trips, because theoretically people will be working there, living and working there, and so therefore they won't be leaving to go to another job. And then there's other, so probably the biggest things here are the proximity to the bus stops, but bike facilities facilitate ped and bike access through the property. And other things that provide high internet speeds and to encourage people to work from home.
Thanks. Can I do a follow-up on transportation? The traffic study estimates 266 new daily trips over existing conditions. And for those people that are not professional traffic engineers, it's really hard to wrap your head around a number like 266 and say, no impact. So how do you go about explaining to people that are not traffic engineers that a number like that really is not significant?
Well, it'd be 266 new trips. And the average residential street a local residential street is expected to handle about 1,000 vehicles per day. And if you look at it over the course of the day, it's I wouldn't even think if you assume people are driving say they're driving 15 hours, so it's about 60 trips per hour for an average street. So the more critical thing we look at to determine potential traffic impacts is what the peak hour traffic is going to generate. And as Ms. Netting referred to, that our standard in Los Gatos is 20 new trips per peak hour. So if a project generates 20 new trips in a peak hour, either AM or PM, that would necessitate a traffic study, which I think I've explained in the past is that most agencies in Silicon Valley require 100 new trips to require a traffic impact, but because in Los Altos we have strong concerns about traffic impacts, we require the threshold is 20 new peak hour trips. As Ms. Nedden referred to, that this project would have generated under 10 new peak hour trips. However, because the 3 existing driveways were on Los Gatos Boulevard, 10 new trips on Los Gatos Boulevard wouldn't be very impactful, but because there are no driveways currently from this property that go into Garden Lane, that's what she was referencing, is the town required them to do a traffic study. Ordinarily, by just going by the rules, it wouldn't be required, but because there'll be more than 20 new trips on Garden Lane, that's why we required, and that's why she said she's glad we did require it, because that's an issue now. So the new trips on Garden Lane would be 31 p.m. peak hour trips and 26 a.m. peak hour trips. Those will be going out, since there are no trips there, those will all be new trips for Garden Lane. That works out to about 1 every 2 minutes for each hour. So based on the existing traffic now, and we did have traffic studies done to look at existing conditions, primarily at Garden Lane and Los Gatos Boulevard, where we have the signalized intersection, and there was very little to no change in the level of service, which, as Director Paulson mentioned, is no longer a secret requirement, but we still look into the level of service, and we still do that analysis for projects within the town.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Commissioner Barden.
And this is for Ms. Whalen. The setback exemption or concession is something that's been included in the application. And so my question is, understanding that members of the population feel that that's not appropriate for this site, do we have the option to require that there be a further setback?
So as a general rule, the town can't deny a waiver that would preclude the project, that would physically preclude the project as proposed. But what I would like to do is go to the statute, and then I can read you the grounds for denial out of the statute. And that might take me a couple minutes.
Okay, and then I had the same question about we talked earlier about the cumulative impacts and a potential study by the town of that, but I believe you said that it would be legally inadvisable to wait for that report to come out before dealing with this project. Is that correct?
As a general rule, with regards to the Housing Accountability Act, it's, if there's any reason to delay a project, it should be like for a beneficial result. And so the question is, if this density was already analyzed for when the housing element overlay zone was adopted, and this project is consistent with the housing element overlay zone, the question to ask is, what new information would come out of that study?
Thank you. That's very helpful. I think those are my questions for now. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions, Commissioner? Yes, Commissioner Stump.
Switching over to the world of parking. Obviously, based on state law, we don't have much of a say on parking requirements for this project or really any of these other like projects that are now in process. Talked about from the town's perspective, we're short 40 parking spaces in this project based on our own code requirements. This is more of a global question, so it's not this project specific, but how is the town going to start dealing with inadequate parking, which we already deal with in the downtown area? Now we're potentially pushing inadequate parking out into our more residential areas. What are going to be, in fact, there may not be an answer tonight, I understand that, but what solutions, or if we don't have solutions, I would really start encouraging us to be looking at what solutions can we put in place. If I lived over on Garden Lane, or if I lived over in this gentleman's neighborhood, I would probably say, let's go to permit parking. We need to go to, pardon? Well, I understand that part, but I'm just saying permit parking or something along those lines. So has any thought been given to how we're going to manage this really parking challenge that's going to kind of getting pushed out into the neighborhoods?
Yeah, well, I'll start, and then I'm not sure if Parks and Public Works might have some other ideas. I know it has been discussed, I can't remember formal or informal settings, knowing that these projects were coming, not just the boulevard, but some other locations where the state allows and requires the town, frankly, it's not even just allows, requires the town to allow them to have the reduced parking requirements. As to what mechanisms or options might be available to help minimize that impact for surrounding neighborhoods. Obviously, one idea would be some kind of parking limitations from a time perspective or permit perspective, but I'm sure there's other ideas that the town ultimately may consider, but I'm not sure if Mr. Heap, the town engineer, is aware of any other thoughts, even though they may not currently be in motion.
Yes, thank you. Gary Heap with the Parks and Public Works Department. We are working on a residential parking permit program policy document. Right now, we do have a number of residential parking permit areas in town, but they haven't been put in really over the years and established with a set of criteria within a policy document. So we are working on that document and should have that ready for distribution and public review in the next several months.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any further comments, thoughts?
I have an answer on the waiver. If
Thank
you're
you.
ready
If
for
you
that.
would.
Okay. So the statute, which is Government Code Section 65915, provides that the public entity shall grant the waiver requested by the applicant unless the town makes a written finding based on substantial evidence that the development standard for which the waiver is requested would not physically preclude the construction of the development at the densities and with the concessions or incentives that are permitted under density bonus law.
Thank you for that information. Commissioners, any other questions for staff? No? Any other, well, thoughts generally, comments generally? Commissioner Burnett.
Yes, and again, referring back to our town architect, I believe he did address the idea that if we did have more of a setback and he gave a way to make up units, I mean, if we, I forgot exactly where it was in his report, but the developer could make up units elsewhere to keep the density but change some of the configuration.
Thank you for those thoughts. I'll go ahead and lay out a couple of my thoughts as I've sat here. I jotted down some notes, perhaps in no particular order, but so this, I think we have to begin the analysis with the understanding this site was listed in our housing element. It was designed to be developed for this very purpose, housing, which includes affordable housing elements. It's what's going to go in this spot, and frankly, it's what should go in this spot. I think our town needs more housing, more affordable housing products. And we can argue about what that looks like and how many units are going to be in there, but I think this is an excellent location for this type of product. This project, they could have developed as an SB 330. They elected not to. They're using the density bonus law, and I want to thank the applicant for that. I think in the end, it results in a better product for them and for town. This product, or this project as currently designed, complies with the housing element overlay zone. So for instance, it's tall, but it's not more than the housing element overlay zone permits, 45 feet. They're within their limits. The aesthetics, I generally find them appealing. The design, I understand Architect Cannon has some additional thoughts, and some of those I think were pretty good. But the notion, for instance, of making each individual unit appear as an individual unit, I think would be an error. If they're only 16 feet wide, for instance, I think what you're going to get is an almost New York City appearance structure, very narrow units, as opposed to a longer, more streamlined facade. I think the density is about right. I think they're not asking for anything specific there. As per my previous comment, I wish there was an additional BMP unit for 3 beds. I think that having a family of lower income status in that facility, I think could benefit from that, but I understand why they can't do that. Parking is going to be a challenge, no two ways about it, but according to the density bonus law, they are at their numbers. They've hit their numbers. They're not asking for anything there. They are also, we're not at a no net loss problem. Traffic, with every project, we're going to have the traffic issues. There's just no two ways about it. This site, I think, has some benefits in that it's got the bus stop, it's close to the freeway. I think it's going to benefit, hopefully, taking some of the traffic directly off our streets into alternative means. That's my hope. And again, the traffic study seems to indicate that there'll be impacts, but not so significant as to raise a CEQA challenge. So, in my view, this is a project, again, I think I want to compliment the builder. They've done, I think, as good a job as you're going to do on this site. There's going to be issues. In this town, we're not going to have any perfect projects. This one checks a lot of boxes. It does, I think, the best you're going to do with that site. Those are my initial thoughts, but I welcome further comments from my commissioners. Commissioner Stump.
From my perspective, this is a good project, but I have continuing concerns about CEQA. The CEQA guidelines section that was applied or discussed in the staff report 15162, the same section used to conclude that additional environmental review is not necessary, also recognizes that significant effects previously examined may be substantially more severe than shown in the previous EIR, which I would argue would be the 2040 General Plan Program EIR. In these cases, a subsequent EIR may, I'll underline may, be required. With the application of Builder's Remedy in Los Gatos, the town is facing unprecedented development beyond what we have ever experienced and beyond what we studied, certainly in the 2020 General Plan or the 2040 General Plan EIR, including higher densities. As an example, 8 of the 15 Builder's Remedy projects, and folks, I'm kind of clumping them all as Builder's Remedy, even if they're not invoking Builder's Remedy, as the applicant here is not. But until recently, they were all identified as Builder's Remedy projects. 8 of the 15 projects have densities ranging from 59 dwelling units per acre to 225 dwelling units per acre. 6 of the 15 projects are clustered along Los Gatos Boulevard. Densities of these projects range from, within the housing element overlay zone, 31 dwelling units per acre to 132 dwelling units per acre. 4 of the 6 Los Gatos Boulevard projects range from 62 dwelling units per acre to 132 dwelling units per acre. And again, I am not a CEQA expert. I'm just someone that keeps asking the questions and saying a cumulative impact study of some sort needs to be done. A supplemental CEQA report needs to be done that's going to really take a look and study our current reality. The volume and concentration of Los Gatos development is new information of a substantial importance under CEQA guidelines. That same section that we referred to, but you go down to, I don't even know how to call this, paragraph A, subsection 3, subsection B, speaks to this directly, and it was understandably not contemplated or studied in 2020 or 2040. We just had no clue about what was coming. Therefore, it's really legally inappropriate to rely on tiering from that document to assess this or similar projects. I would say that's my position. I am not an attorney. I'm doing my darndest, digging into CEQA and taking a look around and getting good advice and counsel from our own town attorney and torturing her with questions, and appreciate her willingness to speak with me about that. So I guess the way I would view this, my preference to try and get to the point where we've got a conclusion and a decision about a cumulative impact study is that I would make a motion tonight to continue this to a date certain. Why? I really hate going forward with the prospect of saying I can't make finding number 1. And so therefore, if we're going to go forward with a vote, I'm going to vote no. And I really don't like that prospect because I do believe this is a good project. So it's not the project that I'm hung up on so much as it is the CEQA question. So I will stop now.
I appreciate that comment. Just in the frame of discourse, if I might, Commissioner Stump, I guess my question would be then, and I think it's the same question that town council asked, what could we learn for this project specifically that would be different?
And I think that's what the cumulative issue is, right? Because right down the street, and again, I fully understand some of these projects that are put forward, They may never come to fruition. But right now, we have to assume they are. So right down the street, sharing the same intersection, a 9 or 10-story building at Ace Hardware. You know, you say, well, it's only 266 vehicles here, and then, well, what's the number of vehicles there? If we don't take a look at the sum total of what's going to go on Los Gatos Boulevard, in this case particularly, we are looking at, I think, some disastrous, and by the way, that's probably dramatic, but I'll just use that word. We're looking at some disastrous traffic consequences if we just look at these one at a time. I agree. One at a time, it looks pretty good. But now, what's the additive? What's it going to look like? So I guess that would be my response, Chairman.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Commissioners, other thoughts? Commissioner Burnett. Yes.
I believe that the applicant has checked all the boxes, if I can use your phrase, with respect to the legal requirements for the project. I think the architecture is acceptable. And I'm concerned that any delay for a program EIR regarding the impacts of cumulative impacts would be putting the town in a position of legal risk. That's not saying that I wouldn't like things to be different, but at least in this case, we know that the town has approved the traffic impacts for this project. And frankly, I don't know what can be done to alleviate traffic town-wide when these builder remedies and the density bonus are allowing these types of projects to occur. There was one interesting comment by the developer of considering architectural changes, and the thought occurred to me that we could have a motion approving the project with a recommendation that the developer work with staff to consider further compliance with the recommendations of the consulting architect, Mr. Cannon. So this is my general thoughts. I think we do need additional housing. I think affordable housing is very rare in the town and is very much required for people trying to get started in the town, and some of our service staff and fire people and the policemen as well. So overall, I would approve the project with the recommendation of at least consideration of further compliance with the recommendations of Mr. Cannon at a staff level.
Thank you for those comments.
Yes, thank you. So I tend to agree with Commissioner Stump. After attending the commissioners' meeting up in Santa Rosa, talking about CEQA, I think we're actually on solid ground. You know, we're looking at the whole picture here, not just one little slice. And I think that's what I came away from at this meeting, that I think a supplemental report, a relook, is mandated if substantial evidence supports a low threshold fair argument that a project may have a significant effect regardless of contrary evidence. So the fair argument standard is very important, and I know when we had our combined meeting with the Planning Commission and Town Council, our attorney that was with our attorney, Ms. Whelan, Ms. Katz, mentioned the fair argument standard is powerful, and it's something that needs to look at. And I think planning commissioners represent the town of Los Gatos and the citizens, and this is a new project coming in. And again, I think we have to look at the total impact of all the projects that may come forward. And that's why I feel we're on solid ground with CEQA. I think CEQA is actually wants us to do something like this if substantial evidence comes forward. And I don't think this was taken into consideration in our 2040 general plan at all. It was based on much different numbers, much different densities. And so at this point, I have to agree with Commissioner Stump and his summary.
Thank you for those comments. Yes, Commissioner Barnett and Commissioner Stump.
The item before us involves a recommendation to the council. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And in that context, if there's a split on the board as to the right way to go, could both of those perspectives be presented as a recommendation for consideration by the council?
I'll say no to start out with, and Ms. Whalen can correct me. Council will get verbatim minutes, so they will hear whatever conversations happen as the motion goes. But if you end up in a 2-2 tie, then that would result in a recommendation of denial being forwarded to the town council.
Thank you. Commissioner Stump.
I guess I was going to refer back to what Ms. Whelan shared with us a while ago when I asked the question, because again, some good work has been done behind the scenes to talk about how do we handle CEQA, in this unprecedented number of projects that we've got coming at us that in a lot of cases we have very little control over. And CEQA is one of the things that we can use because it's really also designed to protect the public. And that's the public that's here currently, our residents. Now, I also believe it protects the public that we're going to be inviting to live in our community as well. Because if we do this well and we understand the impacts well and we plan for those impacts, they will be the beneficiaries of less traffic issues, et cetera. So we're just trying to avoid other severe consequences. And if we don't do that, if we just sort of move forward, one at a time, then we're really not exercising our duty. At best, we're exercising our duty, but at worst, the town may face, we could even face a CEQA lawsuit. We talk about lawsuits. I don't like talking about lawsuits because I don't think anybody needs to really sue anybody, but we're talking about potentially a developer saying, I'm now going to go to court. Public can take us to court as well. Our own residents can file a class action if they don't believe that we're doing the work that is needed, the study that's needed to really lay out a thoughtful plan for this community, housing plan. And I think we all want that. We all want below market rate housing. We want those things. So I will stop there, Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Barnett.
It's just, in addition, this doesn't mean that we will not have projects coming forward. All this means is that we'll take a second look and maybe have the backing of what CEQA wants us to do, take these second looks when circumstances have changed, and have some new concessions or waivers that are not allowed. I don't know, I can't get into that because I don't know that, but what I do know is that development could continue. We would just have a lot of new facts that the town could consider in the projects.
Thank you. My sense is we're divided. I'll just reiterate my prior comments without belaboring the point. Again, we're going to see great many projects in this town in the many months coming forward. To me, and I don't disagree, we have to consider them cumulatively. But even given that analysis, I don't know how that would change this particular project. This particular project I find to be well designed within it the overlay zone limits, asking for concessions which I think are not unreasonable. And so I don't think the cumulative analysis, even if performed, which I agree should be performed, significantly should or would alter this project. And for that reason, I would support it. But I believe we are at a 2-2 tie. And so my question, I guess, to staff is the way forward. Should it be a motion for, and if that fails, then a motion in the alternative against? And then with those two failed motions, leave it at that and have it go to town council? Or a single motion, would that represent the 2-2?
A single motion would suffice,
Okay.
and then it would go If the votes stay as they are, it would go as a recommendation with no to the town council.
Very good. Then, commissioners, I will take it upon myself to make the motion to consider a request for approval to demolish existing commercial structures, construct a multifamily live-work development of 55 units, a conditional use permit for a live-work development, a condominium vesting tentative map, site improvements requiring grading permit, and removal of large protected trees under SB 330 on property zoned CHHEOZ located at 15349 1-15367 Los Gatos Boulevard, APNs 424-19-048 and 424-19-049, architecture and site application S-24-015, conditional use permit U-24-006, subdivision application M-24-008, and I can make all the required findings. And as part of that motion, would include a recommendation for staff and developer to work further to implement the design changes recommended by the consulting architect. That is my motion. Okay. No. Thank you for that. Let me hear from town council.
So because this is an SB 330 project, the town is limited to holding 5 public hearings.
Yes.
And so that's something to consider.
Continuing it would be to a third hearing because the first continued counts as a hearing as well.
Very good. And what, if I may ask, what is the result of running out our hearings?
It is deemed approved.
Yes, Commissioner Brand.
So the 5 limit applies cumulatively to both the planning commission and to the council, correct?
The total of all town hearings is limited to 5.
Right, thank you.
Commissioners, I'm going to put my motion on hold for 1 second and open up the discussion to applicant's request. The request is, as opposed to a denial, to continue the motion, which would have the effect of adding at least 1 more hearing to the mix. So it would take us from 2 hearings to 3 automatically, which would only leave 2 in reserve, which puts town slightly closer to peril, I guess is the best way of putting it. Commissioners, any thoughts on applicant's request given that footing?
And through the chair, I would just offer also.
Yes.
The 2 commissioners who aren't here this evening are both recused. So the 4 of you are going to be sitting up there again.
Right.
The likelihood with the new person, when and if they start in May, then ultimately that's the landscape, but there could end up being a similar scenario.
Understood. Very good. So one argument could be then the quicker we get it to town council, given the divided planning commission, the better landscape for the town of Los Gatos, given legal peril. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I think it's ultimately up to the planning commission, right? You can continue the item, that's perfectly fine. May end up hamstringing future hearings. You can act on it with a recommendation one way or the other. So either way is perfectly fine.
Yes, Commissioner Stump.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess what I'm coming back to is really wanting to get clarity around CEQA. And I know, Ms. Whelan, you said that perhaps that would maybe be a 4-week process. You can't lay a promise on that.
And when I mentioned the 4 weeks, I meant landing on a solution.
No, I understand
not
that.
The finished work product.
No, I fully understand that, in that we land on a solution. And I don't know how that applies here, that if we were to say, let's continue this date certain, 4 weeks out, 6 weeks out, if we have a solution in 4 weeks, I don't know what difference it makes other than we've got a way forward. And as I said, I like this project. This is not a matter of saying I'm against the project. What my concern is CEQA and this whole discussion about, yes, we should consider doing cumulative impact, then I know that conversation's still taking place. And if we were coming back with that settled, I would more than likely at that point in time be a yes vote. I'm not trying to hold anybody hostage. I'm just saying I need clarification around where we're going with CEQA study, period. And that's why I was going to make a motion, Chairman, to do a date certain. But again, I realize there are unknowns here, and I can understand why we would take a vote either way.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments. Commissioners?
I have a
Yes, Commissioner Burnett.
I wonder if we could reopen the public hearing to allow the developer to explain why they would prefer to have a continuance.
Commissioners, any objection? I'll do it, and let's, subject to a limit of 3 minutes. If we can. Thank you, I appreciate that.
The reason for the continuance is because I really strongly believe in the work that Nick Papani and Rainey did with all. It's interesting because when you talk about a CEQA exemption, it makes it seem like there was no work done, but there was numerous amount of technical studies. And so maybe what we can do is that Nick can kind of put it into more simple terminology, because you're right, we are not CEQA attorneys, and I'm certainly not a traffic engineer. So my hope is that Nick can put it into language that we can all understand, review the cumulative impact, and be able to present something that everyone can stand by, because I want you to be able to say to staff, well done. You did a good job on that CEQA, which I know they did, because as an engineer, I reviewed the document myself. So that's literally the only reason for the continuance, is to be able to provide that, please. And just because it's also a good project.
Thank you for those comments. I'll reclose the public portion of the hearing. Commissioner Stump.
I would agree. I read through the CEQA work that was done, and I would consider it to be fine work. But when I look at the underlying EIR that it's resting on, that's where my concern is, that program EIR. And what we were studying at that time, we were studying nothing greater than 40 dwelling units per acre. The housing element, environmental assessment that followed, leaned totally on that general plan EIR. And so my position is not so much the quality of work, because the quality of work was excellent. I agree with you. It's not so much that, it's we still are not looking at cumulative impact.
Let me ask a question. Again, this is for commissioners and staff. What about the notion of, and I'm trying to protect and incorporate Commissioner Stump's and Commissioner Burnett's ideas regarding CEQA into the motion. How about if we fashion the motion, and I don't want to box anybody in, but a motion into approving the project, again, subject to the recommendations of working with staff on the consulting approval, and then further recommendation that town council incorporate or evaluate the use of a cumulative EIR process as part of this project and all future projects. Would that satisfy you?
It's not so much satisfying me. I think I'd have to look to the town attorney as well and say, is this something that we could do? Because basically we're trying to give a project and ultimately a deadline to the council.
Again, so what I'm trying to do is maybe have the cart and the horse here. I'm trying to protect the project, protect the town on the number of hearings we have, but at the same time express our concerns on this matter so that town council can decide whether to, because ultimately it's their determination, since we're only making a recommendation. If the part of the recommendation is to consider the cumulative impacts of the project as well, would that be a reasonable and appropriate recommendation for us to make to town council?
In recommending approval, one of the findings that the commission would be making is that the CEQA work that has been done for the project to date is adequate. And so if the commission were to recommend approval, the commission would need to make that finding. That said, the commission could make that finding and then in addition make a recommendation that the town proceed with a cumulative impacts analysis for all of the pending SB 330 projects.
Commissioners, thoughts? Commissioner Burnett.
First of all, I applaud
sorry.
you. I'm sorry.
So Commissioner Burnett and then Commissioner Stump.
So would that include this project? And then the follow-up question would be if that would, and I commend our chair this evening for trying to come up with some kind of a decision here. Or so my question would be, would staff work as quickly as they can to develop a supplemental report or based on the cumulative impact so that it would go hand in hand, so it wouldn't be delayed longer and longer, so more projects would slip through slip in? But again, would this project be included in the study that we would recommend?
No, because if the commission is recommending approval tonight, one of the findings is that the CEQA that was done for this project is adequate. And then with regard to timing, I'm estimating that staff will have a proposed solution to the cumulative impacts question in about a month's time. And then I would say a fair estimate, if the town elects to go with a supplemental EIR, I would say that preparation of a supplemental EIR is estimated to take at least 6 months.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any further thoughts? I'm not sure where that leaves us. Then is it a fair summary then to say that if we outlined the motion that I just summarized, essentially it would be a tacit approval of the EIR for this project, but then a requirement that that this project be considered together with all future projects as part of a cumulative analysis. Is that a fair way to say it?
One avenue would be for if the commission were inclined and were able to make this finding is that the CEQA was adequate for this project, but to independently recommend to the council that the council direct staff to develop a method for analyzing cumulative impacts for all SB 330 projects.
Well, this project would still be, we could say would still be included in that cumulative analysis, even if we've made the findings and we go forward with a recommendation to approve tonight. The data from this project would still be part of the cumulative findings.
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, Commissioners, given that understanding of recommendations, that would be my motion. I believe I had, maybe just by a show of hands, not a formal vote, those that would support a motion of that caliber before I formalize it. No, or comments, please.
My only comment is we are facing another very large project coming up next week. And how does that fit in the picture?
I'll defer to staff.
So next week's meeting will be more of a study session because the CEQA is not yet complete for that project.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stump.
Sorry for the follow-up question. When do we expect that CEQA study to be completed on that project?
I don't have an answer for that tonight.
Okay, Commissioners then. Commissioner Barnett, yes.
I second the motion as presented by the chair.
Thank you. Okay, we have a first and a second. First of all, staff, do you understand the motion that's currently presented?
As I understand it, the commission is considering making all the findings for approval and then having an adjunct recommendation to the town council that the council directs staff to develop a method to study the cumulative impacts of the SB 330 projects.
Including the current project?
Yes.
With the additional recommendation that on the consulting architect recommendations for design elements. Those would be our two supplemental recommendations. That's the motion, and I believe, Commissioner Burnett, do I have your second on that motion?
Well, it just occurred to me, in addition to the findings, we're supposed to make the consideration under 292150 of the code for granting an architectural and site application.
My motion is so amended.
The
Do I have a
seconder
second?
agrees.
All right, we have a first and a second. Commissioners, any additional comments or thoughts? If not, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hand. And the motion carries 4-0. Mr. Paulson, are there appeal rights?
There are not appeal rights since this is a recommendation. Staff will move forward and work with the applicant on next steps.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for your attendance and for your work on this matter. I'll now turn to quickly other business. We have, or rather, yes, the report from the Committee Development Department. Mr. Paulson, do we have any reports?
Thank you. Nothing to report this evening.
Thank you. Subcommittee reports. In addition to their service on the Planning Commission, commissioners also serve on a variety of subcommittees. Do we have any subcommittee meetings that have happened since our last?
Yes, we did.
Yes.
We had a Historic Preservation Committee today, and we had 3 items. Each item was to remove a home from the historic inventory. 2 are returning to us. 1 was granted. Then there was other business, review for exterior alteration, construction of a second-story addition. And then our chair had the committee talk about landmark designations. And that was the whole of the meeting today.
Thank you for that report. Yes, Commissioner Stump.
Did Kendra actually physically leave, or is she somewhere still in the building? Okay, great.
No, I confirmed she, of course. Well, again, I want to thank everybody, commissioners and staff especially, for their efforts on tonight. It was a difficult project. I think the result was forward-looking and helpful for both the developer and town. And thank you again all for your efforts. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.